Things were looking up, for now at least. The hall was packed. The mincemeat and pastry had all been cleaned up from earlier, and the water from the sprinklers had dried overnight by the caretaker. Carols were playing on the music system, and reflections from the flashing lights on the tree twinkled off the tinsel and decorations that hung around the hall. The children had to squeeze in at the front, facing into the audience. The back half of the hall was taken up by rows and rows of parents sitting on chairs. They were all holding up cameras, phones, iPads, so none of them could really see. When I walked in, my mum and dad leapt up from their seats and started waving madly and blowing kisses at me. I forced myself to smile back at them. Our class squashed into a tiny space in front of the stage. Everybody in the hall was fidgeting or chatting or turning around and waving. I'd made sure I was as far away from Gamble as possible. He was clutching his mince pie bomb, which was about the size of a large plate, and he had a match behind his ear. The bad thing about this was that I was only one space away from the end of the row. Next to me, on the other side, was Kevin Darth Vader Harrison, who always sits on the end, just in case, with Rosie on the other. I didn't know which was worse. I mean, Kevin always feels a bit ill when he's nervous. Then again, he always feels a bit ill when he's not nervous as well. He kept burping right near my ear and saying things like, "Oh, that one was a wettie," which was pretty bad. But Rosie was even more annoying. She was sitting with her eyes closed, breathing really loudly and saying these strange things under her breath like, "Give me strength, universe, give me strength." It was seriously off-putting when you're trying to watch everyone else. "What are you doing?" I asked. "I'm trying to block out all the horrible, nasty things in the world," she said. "Like you, for example." I rolled my eyes. "If I'm so bad, Rosie, why are you sitting next to me?" "Duh, so that I can look even better than I already am," she sniffed. "Now, if you don't mind, could you just shut your disgusting gob and let me meditate, you unbearable scrutball?" "Oh, you're meditating," I said. I have to ignore it when Rosie insults me. At least 98% of the things she says to me are horrible. "I thought you were having an asthma attack," I said. She sniffed. That famous American actress, Angelina Bumwad, does it just before she goes on stage." "Right, but why do you need to do it?" "Wow, you really are unbelievably thick, aren't you? Look over there," she said, grabbing me by the beard and yanking my head around painfully. "You see that man and woman on the front row?" I struggled away from her. "Yeah? What about them?" "They are Mr. Legonk's friends. You know, the people who work in TV and film. They're here to watch me smash it on stage." "Oh," I said. Neither of the people looked particularly special to me. The man was wearing work trousers and a grubby polo shirt. The woman was wearing a tracksuit. "They don't look like film and TV people to me," I said. "Oh, really? And how many film and TV people do you know?" she asked. "They have to dress like normal people. Otherwise, they'd get mobbed by talentless nobodies who want a ticket to the big time." "Right," I said. "Like you mean?" I noticed that they were sitting next to Rosie's dad. He was taking up 2 seats, one for him and one for his phone. "They are my ticket to fame and fortune," Rosie went on. "So don't you dare ruin my big chance." I didn't want to be cruel, but Rosie's big chance was probably going to be ruined by the fact that she was completely rubbish at singing and dancing. Just then, Mr. Noblet hopped onto the stage, and all the chattering in the crowd died down. 20 minutes later, we'd watched the first 4 classes perform. All of the parents had oohed and ahed at the foundation and Key Stage 1 children. Then we'd had the Year 3s, who weren't nearly as cute, but they'd still done a good job. There were 2 more classes to go, and then it would be our turn. By now, Rosie was getting seriously fretful on one side of me, saying things to herself like, "You've got this, you're the greatest, you are going to destroy that audience." On the other side of me, Kevin Bath Vader Harrison was huffing and puffing and had turned completely green in the face. Mrs. McDonald leaned down. "Roman, would you like to go outside with Kevin for 5 minutes to get some fresh air before we go on?" The answer should have been absolutely not. The last time I did this, I had to buy new shoes. Still, it had to be better than sitting next to Rosie. I stood up and followed Kevin as he staggered out of the room, bent over. "I'll come too," said Vanya from further along the row. I was glad to have a friend coming with me. By the time we'd got out of the room though, Kevin had already disappeared into the loos. Vanya and I just had to stand there, waiting for him to come out, while listening to the muffled singing from the hall. It was then that I noticed something. How weird, I thought. The door to the caretaker's room was half open. This door is never open anymore, not since Gamble went in there the other month and drank a whole bottle of cleaning fluid. The light on the inside of the room was on, and someone was clinking about in there. "Wasn't the caretaker in the hall?" I asked, nodding towards the door. "Yeah, he was leaning against the wall at the back," Vanya said, frowning. In fact, all the staff were in the hall, even the lazy ones like Miss Clegg. So if it wasn't someone who worked in the school, then who was in there? "Let's have a look," Vanya said. I held her back. "But what if it's an intruder?" "Exactly," she said, shaking me off and creeping forward. I gulped. Sometimes having a brave friend isn't everything it's cracked up to be. Terrified, I followed her towards the caretaker's room. I could still hear the muffled applause as it drifted down the corridor from the hall. The year 4s must have finished. That meant there was only 1 more class before we were on stage. "We should go back," I whispered, but Vanya shook her head. "Let's just have a peek. If there's a burglar in there, we can go and get help." From inside the caretaker's room, I could hear a whole load of different sounds. Something being unscrewed, the hollow glugging of liquid into a tank. What was going on? Then there was a splash of liquid hitting the floor and a whispered word. It was a voice that I recognised. Vanya slowly pushed the door open and we saw who it was. "Holy donuts," I whispered. "You two?" exclaimed a shocked Mr. Ligonk. "What are you two doing here?"